Hey guys, welcome to the
Hi.
Mindful Life Summit. Want to really welcome Dave Potter. He's a retired psychotherapist and fully certified MBSR, which is Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction instructor by the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where MBSR was founded. In 2013, he created a course called Palouse Mindfulness, and fun fact is he just came back from a 3-week trip to Egypt, flying hot air balloons over some of Egypt's ruins, like the Valley of Kings. And now he came back to be with us. And I'm just really grateful for your time. And thank you for being here with us today.
Well, happy to be here.
Great. So my first question to you is MBSR. Like, I've read a lot about this before, but how did you get started with MBSR? And what is it anyways?
Yeah, well, I first got introduced to it just about the time I started my psychotherapy practice, when I started my own practice. And I'd been a meditator for a long time before that. And I'd even read some of John Kabat-Zinn's books, but I never really got just how deep they were, just what was, he has a book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And of course, that makes sense. And I just took as a kind of a popular book. But somebody introduced me to the 8-week course, the MBSR course, and I took it. And I was so fascinated with how in 8 weeks, how this course allowed people to experience and understand a meditative experience in a way that was natural and in a way that was practical, that didn't use a lot of woo-woo stuff or Buddhist jargon. It was just about living life, and yet it was profound. It had a depth to it that was really remarkable. So I loved it so much that I started teaching it, and I got trained to teach MBSR, and I taught it in a live 8-week course while I was doing in my psychotherapy practices, not as part of the practice necessarily, but something as I did sometimes in the evenings. And it's a bit of a longer story, but the in-person course turned into an online course. So all the materials that I used in the in-person course, I put up online, not really expecting it was going to take off, but people found it and liked it and found it valuable. And now there's about 3,000 or 4,000 people a day that find the online course, and about that many people who have finished the 8-week course. And it's interesting, when I first started it, I didn't really expect that people who did an online course would get as much out of it as they did in the in-person course, because you don't have an instructor there. You're not getting the kind of feedback or the kind of community you might get with an in-person class. But what I discovered is, if somebody finished the 8-week course, did all the practices and stayed with it for 8 weeks, by the end, the result was just as deep as if they'd done the in-person class, which was really kind of amazing and surprising. But the caveat is, doing an online class has certain challenges to it, to finish it. You start something and it's a good idea and you get excited, and then a week later, other things happen and you don't have an obligation to be somewhere at a weekly meeting or anything, and you might drop off. But for the people who finish, it can really be a profound and sometimes even life-changing experience.
What are some of the benefits that your students have shared with you after completing the 8-week course?
They're varied, but often people come into the class doing the course because they're, for any number of reasons, but it might be just dealing with anxiety, or just wanting to be more peaceful about their lives, or wanting to get their life in more, feel a sense of stability about their lives, or they've heard that MBSR is something that can be helpful and effective. And what they tell me afterwards is they often got the kinds of things they came for. They have less anxiety than they had before. They're more able to deal with things and deal with things in a gracious and manner. But more than that, they discovered one of the neatest things I hear from students. They sometimes say is, I discovered I can be a friend to myself. I mean, we're nice to other people that are our friends, well, we're not so nice to ourselves sometimes.
Yeah,
You know,
that's true.
isn't that true? You do something and then you say, "Oh, that was really stupid. You know, I could have done better than that." And so we're often very unkind to ourselves. And a big part of this course is about learning how to be kind to yourself in your own experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you wanted to maybe thank you for that, explaining what MBSR is and also for some of the benefits of MBSR. And you wanted to take just a few moments right now to do a quick meditation.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I mean, some of the people listening may be experienced meditators, and some have not done that before. But it's I would like to give just a quick experiential introduction to what
Mhm.
this kind of meditation is, because there are thousands of kinds of meditations. I mean, literally thousands.
Yeah.
It's not like meditation is a thing. It would be like saying walking or running is a thing. You know, where there's running and there's marathons and there's sprint races and there's hurdle races and there's all kinds of ways of running. There's all kinds of ways of meditating. So I like to give people an experience of of how we introduce meditation. So
Mhm.
we just take about 4 or 5 minutes to do
Okay.
that, if that's okay. And it's just to as you're sitting there or wherever you are, you don't need to put yourself in a particular posture, but just notice as you're sitting there, if you're sitting, how it is to be there. How it is you might notice how your feet are making contact with the floor. You know, the actual sensations, if it could be sensations of pressure or contact, you know, where your soles of your feet meet the floor. You might experience warmness or coolness or throbbing or tingling, or you might not have a sense you can really articulate, but just knowing what it's like to have to pay attention to your feet. You can pay attention to your legs, your calves and your thighs, just letting whatever comes up about them. And in a way, it's you receiving from your body, but it's also giving back in a way. You're paying attention because usually we don't pay much attention to our body. It's kind of extending a hand of attention and kindness to our body. Notice how your arms are resting your lap or in the arms of the chair if you're sitting in a chair. And just letting them just rest there, just like the drapes, heavy drapes would hang in a window. And when you're ready, starting to pay attention to breath. I'm not a believer in making your breath do any particular thing, but just noticing how it is right now and where it is you can experience it most vividly. It might be your belly, you can feel your belly movement, or it might be in your chest, you can feel your chest move. You might feel the air moving through your nostrils or your throat. It's wherever you experience it. There's no wrong place to experience it. It's wherever you can find sensations of breath. That's it. And letting each breath be on its own. You're not controlling it. You're not needing to make it go faster or slower. It's kind of like sitting at the edge of the seashore watching the waves. You know how you watch the waves, they come in and they go out. And you don't say, I want the waves to be faster or slower. You just notice how they are. The wave rolls in, kind of smooths out in the sand. And with its own rhythm, it goes back out. And then comes in again, just letting it move with its own rhythm. And as you do this, you may notice there are certain thoughts that come in, or other images, or memories, or things that come to mind that don't have to do with breath. And that's perfectly fine. That's part of the process. When you notice that happening, you just come back to sensations of breath. That's it, just feeling this breath. Noticing there's a whole cycle to it. It's not just breathe in, breathe out. It's breathing in, breathing in, breathing in. And there's a place where it turns around on its own and becomes breathing out. And just let that rhythm happen on its own. And just taking a few more breaths. And when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can let them come open. Take in your surroundings. Kind of come back. So everybody has their own experience about that. And I wonder if it's okay, Yurika, to ask you about your experience. What did you notice when you did that?
Yeah, so I specifically really appreciate guided meditations. I think they help a lot for me. And so as you're guiding, like, especially like where I was like sitting, like feeling my feet on the floor, I'm sitting on a meditation cushion right now, and half of my foot is actually on something cloth and the other half is on a hard tatami mat. So I was like, oh, there's a little bit imbalance here. And then kind of as I was moving up, I was like, oh, I noticed like my back is hurting a little bit. And so kind of just like readjust. So, but you know, like as you're guiding, I think the reason why I appreciate guided meditation so much is because it helps me focus more on like what you're saying and what I should be paying attention to, because I think naturally for people we have like a monkey mind, right? And it jumps from here to here and here. And I'm just being completely honest, like during even that meditation, I'm thinking like, oh, this guy texted me and I have to text him back, and like, oh, I have a call this next, you know, and then my cats, I kicked outside so they wouldn't interrupt me during this, and they're trying to get inside making some noise, and then you know, then I followed that next thought to like, oh, I feel so bad for them, and then I stopped myself and I came back to my breath, and it's like, okay, like, you know, back to the breath.
So that's perfect. And what you described a perfect meditation session. People think of a perfect meditation session as being one where their mind is clear and it's calm and no thoughts come in. But for most of us, that's not the case. You know, and most of the time, even for experienced meditators, we have thoughts and we think about something that's important to us or something that's going on. And what's important about the practice is not that you get into some peaceful place that's going sort of ethereal and you stay there for, you know, for extended periods of time. It's really about the practice of what happens when you notice your mind has been wandering, and that wandering is actually an important part of the process. You know, I mean, so we often, a new meditator especially, thinks, well, that was really wasted. You know, I need to come back to breath. That was the point of it. But that wandering, it's always about something that has some importance to you, right? You know, it's something that's going on with you. So it's kind of touching into your own life in a way. It's just that you don't stay there and you don't obsess on it. You know, so you think about your cat, you think about an email, and you say, oh, and there's breath. So you come back to breath. In that moment, what you do in that moment where you come back to breath, that's a really important moment. So for a new meditator, often that's the moment where they beat themselves up. They say, oh, I should have been paying attention to breath, but I was thinking about this and thinking about that. But now I'm going to focus on breath and do it right. But after a time, you learn that all of it's a natural process. And that moment where you remember you're paying attention to breath, that's not a moment to criticize. That's a moment to celebrate. Because now you're paying attention. You know, you've taken a side trip and now you're paying attention. And it's kind of like the story I told you when we had our pre-talk earlier in this week. If you're training a dog to fetch, and it's a puppy, you know, you throw the stick and he might pick it up and probably won't bring it back. You throw it again, you throw it again, you throw it again. And when he finally learns to come and bring the stick back to you and drop it at your feet, at that moment, you don't say, "You stupid puppy, you were gone all those different places and now you do it." What do? You say, "Good dog. That is so great. You're back." And the same thing that we learn to do with our own process. So you go off, when you come back and you're paying attention, you say, back to breath. And so that's, I sometimes say that's the most important part of learning to meditate in this way is what to do at those moments when you find a self-critical thought coming in. How do you treat yourself? Do you beat yourself up? And then if you're starting meditation, you might beat yourself up about beating yourself up. So, well, I'm not supposed to beat myself up, so now I'm going to beat myself up. That's crazy, right? So it's just noticing and noticing that it's possible to be gentle with yourself and your own experience.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? Is to not judge ourselves during our meditation and just acknowledge, like, oh, I had that thought. Okay, and then back to the breath, and like, yes, I'm back to the breath. Like, and maybe even give yourself a little bit of a reward to say, like, I remember to come back to my breath. If I could share, like, one of my other meditation practices is just a thought observation practice. And so I almost imagine them like clouds that are passing through the sky, but not being attached to that thought. So you can say, oh, I noticed that I had this thought about X. And then you let it pass. And then but to really be mindful to not grow that cloud to be bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just noticing that thought and then letting it pass. And that practice is.
That's a perfect image. It's a wonderful image because you're not getting in the middle of the clouds. You're just noticing them pass by.
And not controlling it either. Right. It's And I think this is very applicable. I think if we are able to do this practice, it's very applicable to things, how we relate to things that come up in our lives too. So, we had a difficult argument with our boss, and, just like acknowledging it and then just letting it pass as opposed to like growing it into like, oh, what did he mean by that? And does that mean I'm not going to get my promotion? And then, now that I think about it, he said this, 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 this. And then, we're really like growing that cloud into a huge rain cloud that's going to like have a thunderstorm.
Exactly. Nice. Yeah, that's a perfect image. And that's really the practice. This meditation practice isn't about learning to sit perfectly for 30 minutes and that's the end of your practice. It's about what happens the rest of the day too. Maybe even more important. So when you do get a critical comment from your boss or a coworker, it doesn't send you off into some place where you feel out of control. And you don't ignore it either. You're paying attention to it, but in a particular way. In a way that you learn through the formal practice, which is the sitting practice. But after some time, you learn that it's really all of it can be practiced, whether you're sitting on a cushion, or you're at work, or you're at home, or even if there's an argument, or you're at a nice meal. It all can be practiced. It's paying attention to experience.
I had another speaker say the sitting down meditation part is just the training. It's like the training for the practice, because then you go to your regular day-to-day operations and
nicely put.
Practice.
Yes, that's where it really comes into play, is in your daily life. And one without the other isn't. They work together. The sitting practice helps in the informal practice. Times during the day where you may need to find a place where you can deal with what's going on and do it with more graciousness than you might otherwise, and they're both important.
And I just want to share with the audience too that there's no right or wrong way to meditate. Right. Because I think when we start to label things as like right or wrong or good or bad, we're putting we have some like energy behind those words. So and if they're turned off with the word meditation because they've tried it and they don't like it, I would just say just sit and be calm. Because how many times a day do we actually just sit and do nothing. We're
Yeah,
constantly like on our phones and our computers
right.
and like watching TV and interacting with people. But when do we actually sit,
Yeah,
and give time to ourselves?
yeah, exactly. When do you have time for yourself? Because this is time just for yourself.
Mhm.
There's no predetermined idea of what has to happen during the meditation, or what you're going to be thinking about, or what's going to happen. You don't have to do anything. You're not doing laundry. You're not doing things or achieving a task. You're just being, which is kind of a paradoxical thing because it looks like you're doing nothing.
Right.
Right? You're just sitting. You're not doing. Somebody looking at you look like you're doing nothing, and yet a lot is happening. I heard somebody say, it was Frank Ostaseski who said this, is meditation is like you're metabolizing all the things that are going on with you. What's going on with you mentally, what's going on with you emotionally, what's going on with you physically, socially, with your relationships, with whatever
Mhm.
your spiritual path might be. All these things are kind of intermingling, you
Mhm.
know, but you're paying attention to it in a different way than you normally would because there's space
Mm.
for it.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that. There's space for it. And I love that, is like giving yourself the space
Yeah.
to even be curious about, like, oh, what is this that I'm feeling?
Hmm.
And I think there's so many insights that come out of, our meditation or sitting
Hmm.
practice,
Yeah.
because we actually are listening to ourselves.
Right. Exactly.
We're giving
And
us the space to listen.
yeah, and you really literally cannot do it wrong. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way to do it wrong. If you have an intention to sit with yourself, then my students would kind of, after when I was doing the in-person class, sometimes after a few weeks, they'd say, "Oh, you really meant it that we couldn't do anything wrong. Now I get it. It's whatever happens, whatever we think about is fine. If our mind wanders, that's fine.
Mhm.
And part about intention is just it's gentle. It's coming back to breath or whatever physical sensation if you're doing yoga, or a mantra if you're doing that kind of meditation. It's a gentle process, and
Mhm.
it's not about what comes up in your experience. It's about how you attend to it.
Mhm.
It's about your relationship with it. That's really what it's about. Is if there's anything that changes in the process of learning to meditate, is you learn that you can have a different relationship with your own experience. So something difficult happens, it doesn't mean beating up on yourself or somebody else. That can happen, but then you kind of take a step back and attend to it, but attend to it in a more productive, more gracious, and more gentle way.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. In your last sentence, you talked about, when something difficult happens. And I
Mm.
know in MBSR, there's this whole section about like, how do we deal with difficult
Yeah,
emotions and physical sensations mindfully?
and that's a really important topic because it can be and it will be if you actually do the practice, difficult things will come up.
Mhm.
You'll think about things that you don't like about what's going on in your life or yourself or somebody else. That will happen, and how do you deal with that? And if you look carefully at the course, it's possible that it can be too much, just too much. You need to take a step back, and just take a breath, or even stop for a moment and orient yourself, um, because we don't want this to be a practice that's about beating yourself up or pushing yourself in ways that you shouldn't be pushed. But just recognizing that when things come up, there's a way to deal with them. That doesn't. It's kind of that sweet spot of there's. If you just ignore it, it'll come back in its own way and bite you later. If you uh, if you get overwhelmed by it and panic about it and get catastrophize, that's not helpful either. It's finding that place in between where you can be in enough contact with what's going on so that you have a sense of what's happening, but not so close that you're caught up in it, not so close that you're panicked by it, or it feels like things are falling apart, and you can't get control again. Um, so it's a distance, but not such a distance. If that makes sense.
Mhm. So for somebody who is really, who might be new to a mindfulness practice and something difficult came up, let's say they found out that they have cancer, or
Mm.
something really, you know hard, difficult
Yeah.
to deal with, and they're dealing with all of these emotions and like stress and why me, and this is
Mm.
not fair, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, how would you mindfully guide them through, or how does this course guide them through the process of dealing with that? um,
Yeah. First, you begin practicing with things a little easier than the biggest problems. So somebody said something that was irritating to you, or
mhm,
somebody was rude to you, or something didn't go the way you wanted it to go. You you uh, you pay attention to that in a particular way. So you notice what it feels like, the way it might feel in your body. I mean, you may have certain thoughts about it. Excuse me. And it's learning to pay attention to it in a way that allows you to work with it but not be panicked by it. If that makes sense. Um, Sometimes someone who's had a lot of some serious trauma in their lives, physical or sexual trauma, for instance, sometimes things can come up in meditation. They're very difficult, and there's a section, a place in the online course that says a, if every time you sit down and meditate, you panic, or you actually go into a panic attack, and it's scary for you. And by the end of the meditation, when you come out of the meditation, it still feels bad, and you don't want to go back there again, and it feels really terrible to you, and panics you. Then we say you may need to step back from the practice a little bit. There's some guidance in the course about how to do that,
mhm,
changing the practices a little bit, or even stopping meditation for a while. And there may be if it's really serious trauma that you've been through, maybe finding some psychotherapeutic help, either in conjunction with the meditation practice, or on its own, until you get your bearings again. Um, but difficult things will come up, uh, so it's learning to find that place that has you acknowledge what is going on, but learning to do it from a place that is itself not panicked by what's going on.
And I like that you said that, because sometimes mindfulness or meditative practice is not, it's not always pleasant, right? Because it
Right.
forces us to
Yeah.
look inwards, and sometimes it's very painful. But and I like that you said, start small, right?
Mhm.
Start with, oh, that person annoyed me, and then
Yeah.
taking a step back and saying, like, I wonder why I'm annoyed by that behavior. Like, where in my life do I also exhibit that behavior? And starting to be like questioning. And so once you get to a place of like, you know, where you've been practicing this for a while, like I was sharing with you, Dave, earlier,
Yeah.
that, when we go through a difficult time, so just recently I went through like a separation or a loss of a relationship, is giving yourself that time to really do what you need. So like my body
Yeah.
needed like a lot of rest. I needed
Right.
self-care. I allowed myself to eat whatever the heck I wanted to
Yeah.
eat, and I
Yeah.
Netflix binged, and I did all this stuff, which is all for me like part of self-care, but also be really careful about not staying in that
Right.
place, right? Because then you
Right.
can go downhill and then go into like depression and things that are a lot more serious. But for me, since I've been practicing for a while, it's like I'm going to allow myself to be
Mhm.
in this space and give myself what I need. But starting
Yeah, and
Monday,
that's
like
yeah.
I know that like I need to start doing the work, and I know that work is hard. So like in a way, maybe prolonging that time period for a couple days was avoiding. But I also feel like it's what I needed, and
Yeah.
then I was able to really start to do the
Yeah. Sometimes people think that when they're dealing with something very difficult, that whatever they do is dissociating from it.
work.
When they do something different, sometimes you need that. Sometimes
Hmm.
you need it at that point. You need it just to not think about it for a little while.
Hmm.
You didn't do that for weeks and weeks and weeks. You know, it was for a few days. It was important. That was being kind to yourself, and give yourself a break. If it was a friend going through something, you'd say, take it easy, be easy on yourself. You know, just just take care of yourself for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the work can be done later, and it'll be done from a better place than if you try to just plunge into it and try to figure out what happened and how to make things different next time and that kind of thing. So that kindness that you're demonstrating for yourself is really important. And the awareness, you also had a sense after a few days, there was a sense it was time, okay, enough, like now I can start to work on things in a more productive way. You have an inner sense of when that was right for you, and only you would know that. And that's a mindfulness practice. It's knowing when to take care of yourself in that certain way, and when it's time to pay more attention to it. It's that balance between pushing too hard and not paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Staying complacent or like pushing yourself too much.
Yeah, exactly.
In that balance. And I just wanted to note that, I knew that I had to, I was like, Monday, I'm gonna, really do the work. And to tell you the truth, I was not looking forward to it, right? Because again, something like, I'm like, wait, I've just been distracting myself all this time, but then now I'm gonna have to like bring it up and actually process it, like, and but I know that I had to do it because I know what it is on the other side.
Yeah.
And going, I'm a believer of like, you don't get over something, you get through it, and that's the only way that you're actually gonna like really heal through it.
Yeah.
And so you gotta like put in the hard work, and like, I journaled and I this and reflected and all this stuff, and so I came out the other side. And so I just wanted to encourage everybody else too, is sometimes it's difficult, and you just have to be committed to doing the work so that it doesn't become a trigger in the future. Because if I decided to just ignore it or avoid it or like indulge myself and stayed there, then the next really then I carry that trigger with me into every future relationship that I have.
And when you do the work the way you describe, and on the other side, it's not easy work often. And on the other side, you can appreciate the growth that happened as a result of that experience. Say that there are certain things that you learned and certain strengths that you found that you wouldn't have found otherwise. But going through it is not easy. It's never easy. Is in the middle of it, it just feels like you just want it to stop and you want it to be done with. But from experience that after you go through it, there's some learning that's involved. There's a friend of mine gave me an acronym. He says, everything like that, if you actually do get through it, it's a learning experience. He says, but when you're in it, it's not fun. So he calls them AFLOs, another effing learning opportunity. So it's not fun while you're in it, but you also recognize that there's going to be growth in it. And it doesn't make it easy, but there's a place from which you understand that you're going to grow from it.
Yeah, and I also just want to encourage everybody that this kind of practice, like even like me who's been practicing mindfulness for a while, like even I need support, right? So you can have a friend or a life coach or therapist to help you through that process, and it's not something you have to do completely on your own.
Right, because the truth is we don't do anything on our own. You think about it. Somebody turns on the power that comes through you through your power line. Somebody has to generate that power somewhere. The food you get at the grocery store, somebody has to put it on the shelves. The everything that we do has a connection with other people. We don't always recognize that, and for most of us, that's for all of us, that's not enough. There's also the social contact, friends and family and people and trust. Those are important parts of being in this world, and even important parts of practice.
Yeah. So I just wanted to be mindful of our time because we're close to 30 minutes here. If there's one piece of advice that you can give this audience that they can take away from this interview, like what would that be?
You warned me you were going to ask me about that, and I would say it's what we've been talking about. It's about learning, be kind to yourself. So be gentle with yourself. When you find yourself, and those times where you find yourself being self-critical or you're upset about things, is seeing if it's possible to treat yourself the way you treat a friend who's going through something similar. You be with them in a different way than often we are with ourselves. So when something goes wrong, we don't say, boy, I really screwed up, or I'm really not very good at this, or I should have done this better. It's to recognize at that moment that you needed a little TLC at that moment. You're
Mhm.
going through something difficult. So you can have compassion for yourself, just like you did when you had the weekend of eating ice cream and watching Netflix. That's that's being kind to yourself. But it wasn't a naive being kind. It wasn't okay. Now I can just ignore this and everything's going to be fine. It was it was just creating a space so then when the time did come, you could productively deal with things.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's how I'd leave it. Just be kind to yourself.
Yes. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others.
Yeah.
Love. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dave, for being on our show, and really appreciate your time and your knowledge and your expertise. And for this audience, underneath this video, you will see a link that says "Claim My Free Gift." If you click that link, it's going to take you to Dave's website, and there you can check out his MBSR course offered for free. And I will tell you that I've researched MBSR enough. Like I think this is the only free one that I've actually seen out there, and he even gives you a certificate if you complete the course.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's really generous of you, and just grateful for your time and this connection.
It was great being with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.